So I suppose whenever you're ready, Sayuri. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the AMA Career Cafe. Get ready to get hired. My name is Dean McNeil, and we're in for a good night tonight. We've got some incredible speakers that you're going to hear from, and I'm excited to learn as much as you are. I just want to start with a quick thank you to a couple of people. Miglena Nikolova, who is very supportive of the the Career Center when we launched it. Michelle Allen and the good folks at Access Employment, First Work, and who provided the LinkedIn subscriptions, as well as Heather Crawley, who is offering career coaching. So one person here tonight is going to actually win career coaching with Heather Crawley for 3 months. So I also have to acknowledge the fantastic team that put this together. They've been incredible. It is Pratik Asija, Kazia Rip Zaman, and Sayuri Tanaka. They have been incredible. Just a couple housekeeping items just to get going is that first, please mute your mics if they aren't muted. We'd love to hear from you, but we just want to make sure it's clear for everyone to hear during the session. And we've designed this so that there's going to be a speaker and then there's going to be ample time for questions afterwards. And so if you want to ask a question, please put it in the chat. We're going to collect those. There's a lot of people here tonight. So we just want to make sure that we can collect as many as possible, and then we'll provide those to the speakers at the end of each of their sessions. All right, so I can think of no better place to get started with this than to introduce the person who was the champion of the Career Cafe, and is none other than the AMA president, Tina Portillo. Tina?
Hi, Dean. Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much, Dean, for putting this together. Dean has been at the heart of the AMA Toronto Career Center and has put a lot of time and effort into it alongside his team, as you mentioned, Kazi and Pratik. So thank you so much. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and spending your Wednesday evening with us here at the AMA Toronto. My name is Tina Portillo, and I'm the president of the AMA Toronto, and I'm thrilled to be here with the team, welcoming you to our first AMA Toronto Career Cafe for the year. We had launched this, as Dean said, last year, and we've also launched a career board. And this event is really just to showcase and help those seeking jobs. We all know that this past year has been, one unlike any other in this global pandemic. And many of us have probably heard of the new catchphrase being coined, the Great Resignation. And, everyone's sort of looking at their passion and their focus and their career path in their life. And I know it's not unique to this last time that we've been in the last year, but at certain points in all of our careers, I'm sure many of us have thought, what our next step should be. And, oftentimes we've had the training, the tools, and the resources, but sometimes we didn't have that to get there. And so at AMA Toronto, what I'm most excited about this year is our team's focus to really empower your leadership potential. And so no matter what stage you are in your career, AMA Toronto is really here to support the individual marketer. And we strive to be the essential community for marketers and really empowering your own leadership potential across our programming, our events, as well as our opportunities to volunteer on a committee at the board level or through our mentorship program, which Craig Lund will speak a little bit about too. He's also one of our esteemed board members. And so I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. I hope you get a lot out of this event, and we actually will be sending out a survey to hear more of your feedback of what you would want to hear from us in terms of frequency and content as it relates to career development and your own leadership potential. So with that, I did want to also thank Craig Lund, who will be speaking on behalf of Marketing Talent, as well as Leslie Hughes, who is the personal branding expert and head of Punch Media, who will share a ton of great value with the group here tonight. So thank you, Dean and team, and over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dean. I really appreciate that. And you're so right. Things have changed so dramatically over the last year. And obviously, it's a great time that things are heating up, obviously, in September. And that's a lot of the reason that we decided to take this route. So we got a packed agenda, so let's get going. Our first speaker this evening is Craig Lund. He is the president of Marketing Talent, Inc., and that's a recruiting firm. And he basically works with employers, but he's really looking at both the marketing talent as well. And so when we started looking at the program and trying to understand exactly what people would value, we looked at what his skill sets were as a recruiter and realized he's got something unique in that he's working with employers and basically understanding what employers are doing, but at the same time working with job seekers. So really understanding their skills, the intangibles they have, their experiences, and ensuring that there's a nice fit. We thought that's ideal for tonight. Now, Craig is, it's in his DNA to find great matches. And one of those things that is the AMA mentor program, and that's the mentor exchange program. It's incredible. So we just want to encourage you all to check that out, because what they do is they pair successful marketers with up and coming marketers to really empower their leadership potential. So AMA Career Cafe attendees, to talk about what employers are truly looking for, please welcome Craig Lund.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. So Dean, are you going to start off with some questions, or you want me to provide a lay of the land from my perspective?
Lay of the land from your perspective, and then we can do questions at the end. But we've got all kinds of questions, I'm sure, coming up. So
fantastic. Okay, so I guess I can give you guys a bit of a picture of what we see from the recruiter side of the desk. As Dean mentioned, I work directly with companies to help them find people in-house. And to give you a sense of what's been happening in the last 15 months or so, there's been a lot of different factors that have impacted the kinds of roles that have been needed and hired for, and the kinds of roles that have not. A lot of businesses needed to hit the brakes right at the beginning of the pandemic and froze all hiring. So if I was working on roles at the time, all of those got iced, no matter how far along. We were at offer stages with a number of roles, and they lost the headcounts. All of that was to figure out what's going on, what's going to happen with this pandemic, how long is it going to go. In fact, we actually did a June panel, June 2020, with the CMOs. It's an annual event we do, and we asked the question, what is going to happen with the pandemic from your point of view? Do you think things are going to rebound in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? Most people predicted within 6 months we would be back to normal. Now we're 17, 18 months later, and that's not the case. We've only just got vaccine rollout. Really, Canada's an anomaly globally. The rest of the world is far behind us. Over the period of time of COVID, what I noticed was that, of course, everybody automatically focused on getting their businesses ready for digital go-to-market strategies. So if they were very dominant in the brick and mortar space, they were trying to get themselves to pivot to an e-commerce property if they didn't have one already, or redirect any ads that they were doing to get people onto their online properties versus traditional marketing. So that meant that digital roles really got the precedent. Anything that was general or strategic related got completely put on hold. We saw very few roles, even senior leadership roles that were critical to directing entire departments or teams, went quiet or went slow. They stopped using money to spend on recruiters externally. They tried to do hiring wherever they could internally. But the problem was that there were so many people going after that digital segment that it made it really, really difficult to actually be able to attract talent. A lot of these large firms that have internal talent house recruiters, those people are doing a janitor one day, a VP of sales another day, and marketing. And as you guys know, marketing is a very wide vertical. There's very different aspects to it. A lot of these recruiters don't have expertise within marketing. They don't understand the nuance. They see the word marketing once on a resume, and they'll put that in front of a senior leader. And obviously, we know that that person's not necessarily going to get the job, because skill-specific roles, especially in the marketing on the digital side, we need to know. I only want to see somebody who's got Marketo experience, for example, because that's the platform we use. We don't want to see somebody who's worked on, MailChimp only and has no idea how to use something like that. Same side, performance marketing was another area that saw a lot of demand. But of course, everybody wanted to get into paid space. And what that meant was that people who had that capability also started demanding higher salaries, and it really created a lot of disruption. Another thing that was really interesting was that when as a recruiter, I want to make sure that I'm using LinkedIn from the back end. I use a license called LinkedIn Recruiter. It costs about $10,000 a year per recruiter to have access to it. It costs a lot of money, but it's also got some finite capabilities. So for example, I would reach out to candidates that I really like the look of because they match something that I'm working on, and I would send them an email. Now, if they're not highly active on LinkedIn, they might not respond. And if they're not open to work, they're even less likely to respond. So I typically only look at people who are actually open to work and have indicated in the back end of the setting. So I'm not talking about that image that LinkedIn gave out. People could publicly show that they're looking for work. I'm looking for the setting that you do so that your employer doesn't know that you're looking for work. So typically before the pandemic, if I reached out to 100 people, it's never that many, but if I reached out to 100 people, I'd hear back from about 80% of those people after my first email. Yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not interested. It's not the right salary, not the right location, not the right industry. Boom, they're off my table. I've now got 20 people out of 100 that haven't responded. I can reach out to 100 people that have indicated that they're open to work, and I will hear back from maybe a third of them after I've reached out 3 times. This is despite the fact that they have actually told me, they told LinkedIn that I am open to finding an opportunity. And Forbes did a study on this with LinkedIn to understand what is going on, why are people doing this? The reality is if you think about people 17 months ago who already was starting to go, there's no way up for me, I'm already starting to look for where I want to go next. The pandemic really put them behind by 17 months. These people were looking to be in the job market 17 months ago. And a lot of people have these human ideas of what's going to happen if they take a new job, that whole ethos of, last hired, first fired. And that's one of the things that the study made an assumption about whether or not people are not moving or not acting on opportunities, because we saw things like people getting offered jobs and accepting offers and not showing up at the job. This is a behavior that I've not seen in 15 years of doing this. So again, COVID really created a lot of disruption. But what's really great is that about 2 or 3 months ago, what we did notice is that people were starting to respond much more to our outreach. So when I reached out to people, and bear in mind, as a recruiter who's niche, I only reach out to people that I can see they have a huge amount of criteria that they meet for a job. So these people most likely, unless the salary's off or there's a specific geographic location or they don't want to work on site or whatever, that's the only reason they're going to say no to this role or they're not ready for this role, because they've already told me that they're open to this opportunity. So generally speaking, I should be getting a good response. So we saw that has really shifted now compared to what it was 6 months ago. It's really encouraging. We've also noticed a big shift in the kinds of roles and the amount of hiring that's happening. The shift back to general roles and strategic roles and senior roles, we're starting to see them come back, which kind of sends us the message that the optimism that the market has because of the vaccine rollouts is good. The only thing that we need to be considerate of is what's going to happen with the US, because we need to see a lot more vaccine adoption down there. The Delta variant that impacts the market in the US directly impacts the Canadian market. We are literally a graph that follows them, like when Doug Ford opened schools and said, oh, the schools aren't causing a problem. We follow their economy very closely. So if their economy is not doing well, we don't tend to do as well as we could be. So there's a lot of different factors that are going on. I'm going to just change directions here to away from what's happening with COVID and a little bit to what's happening with the recruiter side. There's a lot of pressure on recruiters right now. There's a huge shortage in recruiters, and there's a huge volume of people looking to do hiring in their organizations. So companies are now running into that problem where they don't have the capabilities in-house to do it. There's a lot of, Martina talked about early on, the great resignation. This is something where people are expecting to see a large number of people, we're already starting to see it, who are going to not continue to work in an organization no matter how much they love it, because it doesn't align with their values. So an organization that is not going to let them have hybrid working or remote working, and that's something that's become important to them, they're prepared to walk away from those jobs. And there's enough new activity in the marketplace that that's attracting them. So that's a new factor that's post-COVID that we're going to start to see. There's a lot of people that are really active in finding that next role. So there's a lot of competition for talent. There's a lot of competition for jobs. And so it's a really different animal, something I haven't seen in the last 15 years. So it's really exciting to see that there is volume in activity for candidates looking for work, as well as candidates, companies looking to hire. But there's a lot of turnover, so it's making hiring much slower, much slower. I'm finding that it's taking longer to engage the candidate. It's taking longer to get the clients to commit to seeing the candidates. The grass is greener syndrome is alive and well. You know, is this the best candidate we can see? Can we wait on? And guess what? That other candidate is now taking another role because some people have been out of work for a while. They're not in a position where they can just wait another few days or another week to find out if that offer is going to come through because a client won't make a decision. So let's say I'm optimistic about what I'm seeing in the marketplace. Know that there's a lot of pressure on recruiters. Also know that recruiters are not career counselors. We get a lot of people who reach out and say, hey, I'd like to pick your brain. I'd like some advice. But guess what? That doesn't pay my bills. And there are hundreds of you to the few jobs that I'm working on at any one point in time. And so recruiters can only work on roles and only provide candidates that really meet, I'd say, you know, I always joke, 120% of the criteria from a job. You know, if you directly interacted with the hiring manager, that's my client, for example, and you had 70% of the criteria and they really liked you. They met you at a coffee a couple of months ago, and then, you know, you touch base, you're like, hey, I noticed you're hiring. Very likely that you'll have a chance to have an opportunity to interview. But if I presented you, I'm going to charge a very large fee for your placement. The client will always go, I want to see everything on my list. I want to see everything and more. So 10 out of 10, I can only send them a 10 out of 10 candidate. You know, just the sad part about that is sometimes you'll end up with a candidate that has some great experience outside of the industry that can provide a lot of value. And if that's their loss, I do my best to try to present those candidates, but generally speaking, I can only hand in one or two of those. I call those wild cards. That's a candidate that I feel really confident about, who might sell with similar technologies or similar channels or a business model that's similar. It's just a completely different industry. There's a really great opportunity to bring somebody what we call conversion of industries, to take that thinking and bring it into a new model, especially when you've got an old industry that's really stagnant and you bring in ideas from a very new or much more forward thinking industry. For example, the accounting firms were much better than the law firms. So that we typically would see them wanting to take talent from the accounting firms into the law firms to upgrade their marketing capabilities. I said quite a lot, so maybe I should leave it to some questions at this point.
Thank you very much. That's incredible, Craig. Like, incredible insights. And it's funny, a lot of people talk about the importance of networking, and you were talking about, you know, how a resume application just in general versus a networking opportunity that someone has where they actually know the person and how that affects it. So I've never really actually heard that networking and how that networking is kind of manifested into the process. Like, that's great insight. So we do have some questions, and I'm actually going to start with one. You must do a lot of interviews with people via Zoom. And so that in terms of interacting with a potential candidate, when you do that, like, how difficult is it to get a feel for, I guess, the body language, I guess, of the person that you're talking to? So that you could, you know, if, you know, when you meet in person, it's obviously, when you talk about that coffee shop meeting, it's obviously going to be much different. So what is it that you look for when you do a Zoom call with someone that's a candidate, to get a feel for who they are?
One thing that's really great, and this is something I could share personally about myself, is I'm hearing impaired. I wear a hearing aid. I'm completely deaf in my right ear, and I hate the telephone. I can't capture everything that's going on with that phone call through the audio. I can't see how a person's behaving. And before COVID, a lot of people were pretty reluctant to get onto video calls. They would make up excuses and whatnot. And COVID has now changed that. It's now made it that the unacceptable thing is to not be prepared for a video call, and so that people know that you're present and you're there. It's very easy to see how engaged a person is. I had 3 interviews today, for example, and one of the things that is really frustrating, I sent out a bunch of information about what the role was, what the company was, and how they sold, etc. And all 3 of these candidates showed up asking me questions like, "What's the name of the company? How do they sell this and the next thing?" And I was gobsmacked. I'm like, a lot of recruiters will never tell you the name of a company and whatnot, but with COVID, I found that just slows things down and potentially loses candidates. I'll tell you right away, this is the name of the company, this is how they do things, this is what the core role is going to be about, and it qualifies people quicker. And if you start asking me questions about information I've given you, I'm sorry, you've wasted my time. You've not shown any engagement. I've not shown that you'd be prepared for me reaching out to you about an opportunity to put money in your pocket. And so for me, that I have a pretty high bar for that. Don't waste my time. I'm working for somebody. I only get paid when I fill that role. And if I've taken the time to go through your profile and send you a role that's probably really good fit for you, you've lost the opportunity. I will simply just decline you right away, and you will not move forward in that role.
That's awesome. No, thank you. So I'm going to take another question here. What do you think about objectives on a resume? You think it's mandatory or not? Because some people have heard that having objectives on your resume actually helps or hurts.
Yeah. So I think an objective statement or profile statement is a great way of sending a message to an employer that they're hiring you for the job that you actually want. And the challenge with COVID is that some people have been out of work for a long time and they need to take an emergency job. They need income. But that profile statement should say, what kind of a marketer are you? What's your industry experience? What's the size of organization you work in? It should really paint a profile of what kind of a marketer you are. And for example, I will know right away if you're from a small startup, you're not going to do really well typically in a Scotiabank, for example, or big enterprise or matrixed organization. People who come from entrepreneurial small companies like that find it very frustrating. And unless you've come from the ground up, it's really rare to see that kind of person. So I will use that to decide whether or not I'm going to engage you in the search at all. That's something more sophisticated that a recruiter like me would do. A talent person, in-house recruiter is not necessarily going to do that. And even a hiring manager might not necessarily think to do that. But for people who are like us, headhunters who are looking for that information, that sends a message to us about the kind of role that you're going to be successful in. Because here's the thing, is we put a guarantee in place. If you're not successful in the first 90 to even 6 months in some cases, I have to do this search from scratch. And I'm not interested in doing the search twice.
That's incredible. Okay, so I have one here. What strategies do you have for avoiding ageism and other inherent biases that arise from looking at someone's resume?
Ageism is something that is alive and well. There are a number of other biases that exist. It's nice to see that LinkedIn is actually rolling out tools, for example, automatically covering people's names and people's images so that you can look at a profile. This is a really great DEI angle to make sure that there is no inherent bias. That's a great tool to see that being rolled out. There are people who are going to be biased and there's no way around it. That's unfortunate. Generally speaking, good organizations are going to look at you and bring you in for the skills that you have and will be able to bring you on board. Ageism, I think it's far better to be honest about who you are and what your profile is than trying to hide it. Hiding it looks obvious and it sends off a flag. It's just like, it's the same thing as having a job where that you were only there for a year, rather than articulating that this is a 1-year mat leave contract or something like that. I don't have to wonder, oh God, they got canned after a year. I would not assume that automatically as a recruiter, but a hiring manager might. So get rid of the question, put the information there. Sometimes there is a candidate I saw today. They had a role for 6 years, and in the middle of it, they had an 8-month job right in the middle. It didn't make any sense. What is this job? It didn't explain that this was a secondment by the head of the company to work on a special project. So they weren't taking a side hustle in the middle. So some hiring managers don't want to see somebody with a side hustle. That's their prerogative. But that hiring manager might discount this candidate because of it, because that explanation could have been put into the resume.
Excellent. That's great. Now, I presume you work with some of the ATS systems, and so I'm curious if you have any specific advice for people who want to address those things and make sure that they are prepared when they send in a resume to, hit those things, because I know that it's easy to weed people out very quickly, and I know that's a struggle and a frustration for many people. So, do you have any suggestions about how to address ATS?
Yes. So the number one thing is use Word-based resumes and not PDFs. PDFs were not all created equal. A PDF that comes out of an Adobe is a image-based PDF. A PDF that comes out of Word is a Word-based PDF. So, for example, when it gets parsed, PDFs in an image-based system will have blocks of content, and a parsing system is not going to know how to organize that content, and a lot of times it might not parse things correctly. Put it in Word, think like Google. When I type in my top 3 or 4 keywords that I'm looking for, digital marketer, for example, I want to see HubSpot, I want to see some SEM, and I want to see marketing automation, and maybe something like the industry, automotive. And when I get that list, I can see a lot of yellow, all the highlights of the words I want to see. If I don't see enough yellow, I'm not going to stop and look in your resume. That means you haven't even made it to my first pile. So this is why it's really critical in that objective statement in your role to use the language or words, the jobs that you want, not the jobs that you've done. Because, for example, I'm really good at administrative. I hate it. Now, if I talked about all the great things I do, to run my business really well because my administrative capabilities, my resume is going to give me a job for a role that I'm going to hate. So build the resume for the job that you want using the truth, the experience, the tools that you've used that are going to be relevant to that job.
That's awesome advice. Now, I have a question here. How does one pivot from advertising to switch over to the client side?
That's really, really a challenge if you are trying to go to a company that doesn't believe in that. Hiring managers will have preconceived biases on, I only want to see somebody who's come from an agency background, or vice versa. That's where networking is going to really help you. Well, I always suggest there's a 2-prong approach that you can take for your job search. There's the long haul, and then there's the quick hits. Quick hits is finding opportunities that are posted, applying to those, but they're very much a shot in the dark. The long haul one is where you take your top 5 to 10 companies that you would love to work with, start finding who the potential hiring manager is, reach out to them, and have a reason why you want to reach out to them. Hey, I love this campaign you just did with, Peloton and the wife, and that great Christmas present that you hated, whatever that was. The fact that you are talking specifically about work they've done in the market and asking them, hey, I'd love to know what it's like to work at your company. And you might just get that copy. They won't be able to hire you today, but if they do come up with something down the road, they're going to be like, hey, I had that really great coffee with Flavia, and she talked about some of the stuff. She seemed to be really attached to the brand. And you do that with 10 plus companies, you're going to learn if their values are going to be aligned with yours, which is, let's be honest, since COVID, values is a really high up there item that people are looking at. Is this company aligned with my values and my belief systems? Money is up there as well still, but it's not as high as it used to be. People would far rather work for an organization that's going to appreciate them for who they are. The value system is going to be aligned. You'll learn that from those coffee meetings. And that random call that comes in 6 months time, 7 months time, 18 months time. Hey, I'm hiring. What's going on? Are you still looking? Or are you interested in an opportunity? There's something that might be up your alley. That's a long game, but that's going to get you the job at the company that you're dying to work for.
Yeah, excellent. Now, I'm going to circle back to that ATS question. I just wanted to ask, how long is a resume supposed to be? Like if you have 20 years experience versus, a couple of years experience, is 2 pages the ultimate, or is 1 page now?
Nope, 2 is fine. It can be slightly longer. What I would say is abbreviate anything that's more than 10 years ago.
Okay. And what about sometimes when you're submitting applications, people, they don't ask for a cover letter and you want to express something specific to the job or customize it to the job. Is it appropriate to attach a cover letter in with the resume as one document, or is that frowned upon?
I personally don't like it, but because when I'm parsing it, it makes a mess. I end up with a cover letter on top of a resume. And so when I want to submit that resume, I'm now going to request that this document get broken up into 2. We have things called email, and generally speaking, people will sometimes send me a letter, attach a cover letter, and I'm like, well, that could have just gone in the email. Email has replaced the cover letter. Obviously, that doesn't apply to applying to job boards and whatnot. But generally speaking, whenever you can, try avoid the job board and find out who the hiring manager is so you can get in front of them directly.
Excellent. Now, how would you advise someone who is moving from a boutique agency or a smaller scale agency to something that was much larger, and to try and find those roles in a bigger shop?
Again, it's networking, getting somebody who's going to take a risk on you. Those biases will exist. Some people will be the big shops and the global networks. Well, I'm not sure somebody from a small shop is going to know how to navigate this. The exception, I think, would be on the creative side, where your creative speaks for itself. But on the accounts teams and strat teams and whatnot, those roles are typically much more narrow. Whereas in a boutique, you might have some account management and some strategy and maybe do a focus group and that's the next thing. Whereas you're only doing strategy. In the bigger firms, you're only doing account management, and there's multiple people within that area that's doing it. So again, if you've got a relationship, that's the easiest way to do it.
And switch gears for a little bit. So obviously data and analytics is a big part of business now. And so I'm just curious, is that part of the recruiting industry as well? Are you using data or compiling data on people in a similar way to use machine learning to try and help you identify the correct candidates? Or is that what the LinkedIn subscription that you have does for you?
No. So I would say in roles that are much more generalist, where their volume is really high, they are using a lot more technology, such as video screening, AI, automatic interviews, to shortlist and people to get them in front of a human. We don't do that in my firm. We're too specialized. But when you're working for a big bank and you need to hire tellers, for example, and you want to qualify, you need to hire thousands of them. That's where you're seeing that. You won't see that as much in our organization, within the marketing vertical.
Okay. I have someone asking, and they've had 7 years of professional experience, but they've gone back to school. And so they're wondering in terms of how to present that education experience or the updated education experience in marketing to try to break into the industry. Is there any suggestions to put it up front, or is it traditionally you put education lower in the resume?
Education is great. What you can do is, if you can volunteer with an organization like AMA and actually apply the education, hiring managers really want to see that you've applied work. Generally speaking, if after 17 years, you've got the education that got you into the industry originally out of the way, and you've now got, what I feel is the real value is your actual work experience. Work experience at this level typically does give you more of an edge over education. If you've not applied, for example, I'm looking for somebody who has had 3 years of experience doing marketing automation. Well, it's great that you've got a course and you've just completed that, but you not experienced the pitfalls of the program and the strategies that have worked or haven't, you don't come to the table with 3 years of experience within that discipline. You just know how to use the tool.
Okay. Now, I'm going to switch back. This is going to be the last question. So what if you're switching industries? A lot of people who are not coming from a marketing background are trying to switch in. I know a lot of the questions going to revolve around, getting out there and networking, but is there anything practical people can do other than just going out and trying to meet with people and get that, relationship and networking going, especially obviously in COVID times where a lot of this stuff is done with Zoom? How do you get those coffee meetings on Zoom?
I think I've touched on this earlier. A lot of people don't realize is that if you have one industry that sells a certain way, here's a great example. Mortgage companies sell through broker networks. So who else sells that way? So that's a B2B play, and that's also a B2C play. Who else does that? Well, it happens in the automotive industry. You have dealer networks. You see that in insurance. You see that through regional hotel systems. If you can take the time to kind of figure out what other organizations sell the same way, because they often use the same tools. They might do trade shows. They might also use marketing automation. They do one-to-one marketing. They are going to use the same marketing stack that you typically would. So you already have all of the same things that they would look for in a candidate, and all you have to learn is the industry. So it's a great way for you to kind of figure out how to get out of the industry that you're in without creating a total hurdle for the hiring manager to go, how on earth is this person going to do this job? But you go in there with being like, well, guess what? I do it the same, just within this industry.
That's incredible. So wonderful advice. Obviously, I'm glad I didn't ask questions at the beginning because you covered so much great stuff from the get-go. It's incredible. So I really want to thank you, Craig. Obviously, you proved us right for picking someone like you because you really had that insight. And so for anybody who's interested, you can go to marketing-staffing.com. That's where the company is, or you can just Google Marketing Talent Inc. Thanks very much, Craig. That was incredible. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, our next speaker is Leslie Hughes. Leslie is an author and head of personal brand firm Punch Media. She's highly sought after for her expertise and smart takes in social media, but for us, incredibly importantly, it's about the LinkedIn profile and really authentically positioning with a clear and clear brand message that really speaks to employers. And so she has a wealth of experience coming from corporate as well as startups. And she has a YouTube channel. I encourage you to go subscribe to it because it has also some phenomenal content. For many of you, you have seen Leslie before, and it's a testament that you're here again because the quality of her content and the value that she brings is tremendous. For those of you who have not seen Leslie before, you're in for a treat. Everyone, please welcome Leslie Hughes of Punch Media.
Awesome. I'm so excited for this. I learned so much from Craig already, so this is just going to ladder up with some of the things that Craig's already mentioned. So I'm a huge champion of LinkedIn. While I've been teaching in the online landscape for over 20 years, LinkedIn is my baby insofar as this is not only the channel where you're going to really focus on finding employment, but even when you're in your current position, it's a really great way for you to brand yourself as a professional. And whether you're in marketing, sometimes people are also in a sales role as well. This is a great way. And Craig already mentioned the importance of networking. So all of these things together really are important when it comes to LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, of course, we know is the professional networking site, right? So it's where professionals are investing time as opposed to sort of wasting time. Listen, I teach at a college as well. I know my students think that this is the most boring site out there, but really when you get into the nitty-gritty of how powerful it is, you'll really realize that there is so much more to LinkedIn than you ever gave a thought to in the first place. So with over 722 members worldwide, specifically in North America, it is a much more powerful tool than some other countries. And this is where, as I said, you know, there's more C-suite level, more people investing time here, decision makers and so forth. So if we can just go on to the next screen, I just want to give you some quick tips on how to make sure that you are optimizing that first impression. What I like to call LinkedIn is your resume with personality. And why that's important is because it is, you know, Craig will tell you that it's really important that he only has a few seconds to go through a resume. And then if he has more time, maybe he'll go onto a LinkedIn profile or vice versa. So that first impression really is everything. As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit of a chatty girl, so I have a tendency of going long. When we get into the Q&A section, Craig we may go head to head on this. I have a tendency of telling a bigger story, but a relevant story, I think, is the key here. So if you do nothing else on your LinkedIn profile, you really want to focus on your photo, your headline, and your summary. So I actually just learned something from Craig insofar as that, you know, those images and the ageism are maybe taken away. I didn't even know that was happening, so thank you, Craig, for that. The importance really of your photo is that first impression. And so ideally, you want to be looking into the camera, you want to be smiling, you want to be dressed professionally. And I have seen everything from headshots for people drinking or perhaps you know, passport photos. It may be not natural for you to feel like you want to get your picture taken. I hate getting my picture taken, but we all carry these little devices in our pockets. There's no excuse as to why you cannot have a simple, even this background that I've got is probably a little too cluttered. I would go with a simple, plain background. Wear something that you would wear to a job interview, look into the camera and look confident and competent, and that really is going to speak more volume than you can even imagine. You wouldn't believe how important that headshot is. The second area to focus on is your headline. So after your name, your headline is the next area that really can showcase your unique value. And what I typically will do when I'm writing LinkedIn profiles, because I also do that as I write and optimize LinkedIn profiles, is I will do a big sort of brain dump, if you will, take the resume, take the job opportunity that I think would be perfect, my dream job. So I have my experience, the role that I want to be in, find out how to really expand upon who I am, what I do, and how I can help. So I think those are really three things that you really want to make sure you focus on is what is your unique value? What makes you different than any other marketer out there? And so as I sort of say, write this all down in a Word document, and then I write the summary, and then I'll circle back and write the headline. And the reason for that is, I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, well, probably haven't, because it comes from a 16th century philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal, who said, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. It's a lot harder to condense copy down than it is to go long. So I'm going to give you an example on the next slide that's really going to help you get really focused on that headline, which is, again, your unique value proposition of who you are and how you help. So if we can just move on to the next slide, that would be probably helpful. I wanted to give you guys some examples, and actually there is going to be a little bit of a worksheet takeaway that will be shared with you as well. So these are just some ideas of what you can put into your headline. Again, focus on those keywords that a recruiter, a hiring manager might be looking for, and get really congruent with your specialization. You don't want to be a jack of all trades, the master of none. You really want to focus on who it is that you help. What do you specialize in? How do you help your clients or your audience solve their problems and so forth? So really that's what you want to focus on is who are you, maybe the role that you're currently in or the role that you want to be in. You really want to say like aspiring, marketing, blah, 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 you know, specializing in this particular industry or solving these particular problems. So you have I wrote 120 characters. It's a little bit old. You have 220 characters to essentially expand upon who you are, what you do, how you help, and again, really focus on those keywords at the very beginning. So if you just want to move on to the next slide. We'll get into the next little bit. Now, the meat and potatoes of LinkedIn is your summary section. And I really dislike that LinkedIn has really truncated it so that when you get onto LinkedIn, that about section or the summary section now is only a couple of sentences before someone has to click on see more. And I'd love to ask Craig this question once we sort of get to the Q&A, is how important is that summary section from a recruiter standpoint? Because for me, this is where the magic happens. This is the storytelling that really differentiates you compared to anybody else that's out there. Now, your summary section, you have 2,000 characters to tell your story. And I love the Simon Sinek video, Start With Why, because he says over and over again in the video that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Why did you choose marketing as a career? Why did you choose the vertical that you're in? Is there a backstory there? I always find that kind of interesting. Sometimes it's not really that interesting, but if it is interesting to your story, definitely showcase that. The other thing that you have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable with is highlighting your accomplishments. Your accomplishments are so crucial to your profile. And this is where you want to set yourself heads and tails above everyone else. Now, I know that you're not going to feel comfortable with this because we've all been raised to be modest, to be bashful, to not, tell everybody that you're amazing. And here we are in 2021 and we're saying, be different, be a brand, be unique, stand out. It doesn't feel right. Now, and I have interviewed some very senior executives, in both Canada and the US, and I can tell you that they still don't feel comfortable highlighting their accomplishments. We all have some sort of imposter syndrome. But let me reassure you that if you do not showcase your accomplishments on your profile, number one, you're doing a disservice to your audience. Everybody wants to work with the best. And so do your best to quantify, to really find out those things that make you different. Perhaps you obtained an award. Highlight that. If you have been promoted in your role, if you have been able to quantify the success, how much money that you brought into the business, and maybe you can't say in the dollar amounts, but perhaps you can turn that into a percentage. Those kinds of things, or maybe the brands that you've worked with, are really key ways for you to highlight the value that you're bringing. And if you're a student, include the things that you're volunteering in so that you can highlight the fact that you are putting initiatives forward, that you are actually not just waiting for people to come to you, but you're actively participating in the community and doing what you can to facilitate change. So within that 2,000 characters, and that's going to sound like a lot until you start to get into the nitty-gritty of all those accomplishments. And that's going to make sure that your story is very, very well-rounded. My advice to you is also to write in first person. So that means I am. And again, some people may feel conflicted about this, that a bio is sort of written in third person, which is Leslie Hughes is. But the I am, I have had 30, or I haven't had 30 years experience, but I've had 20 years of experience in digital marketing, and I've worked with these brands. I mean, for me as the reader, I'm going to feel a lot more connected to someone who writes in first person than someone who writes in third person. And that's a kind of a subjective thing, but again, you're writing for the reader. You know what you're good at. You know what makes you different. You're writing for the reader. And the other aspect of this too is you're going to have to think about those keywords that Craig was mentioning that is going to align with that dream role that you're looking in. Now, there's not a perfect recipe or a perfect science to making sure that you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, that all of the right things are happening, but you want to add as many tools into your toolkit so that you are found. And as Craig mentioned, and I'm going to reiterate this because I hope that people got this message, recruiters like Craig are not there to play, they're there to place people, but his primary his client is the primary person that he's working for. Because I get that question all the time. Leslie, if I optimize my LinkedIn profile, are recruiters going to find me? That's what the number one thing. It's like, yeah, that's possible. at the same time, that's not a recruiter's role, is to find you a job. The recruiter's role is to find a placement for their client, who happens to be the company. So it's kind of a hand-in-hand sort of marriage there, but I just want to make sure that Craig was very clear, probably clearer than I was when he sort of explained that. But you definitely want to use those keywords, but networking is so crucial, and I'm so glad that Craig mentioned that, because that's what I understand is networking is important. Anyway, back to all those other things. So accomplishments, keywords. Look up a few different job postings for the dream role that you have, and see if you can't marry up the copy that is in those job postings with your LinkedIn profile. See if you can weave them into the story somehow. If they're looking for this, you want to say that you have this. Now, LinkedIn's going to only be like a master resume or a master version of all of it. You cannot tailor your LinkedIn profile to every single different job posting out there, but ideally you want to have sort of a synchronous resume meets like LinkedIn profile. And as I said, I think your resume can showcase a little bit more personality than simply just that first impression of the resume. And lastly, as marketers, we all know how important it is to have a call to action. So as someone's reading through the copy, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is how I help, and if you want to reach me, here's how to reach me. You want to make it very, very super simple within the summary itself. And yes, there is a contact info area, but you want to make sure that anybody who's going to reach out to you has that contact information right at their fingertips. So if you want to just go on to the next slide, I want to make sure I know I've got a lot to cover in only 15 minutes. So the three ways that I sort of boil things down here is that number one is to create that first impression. And I don't have enough time, I'm afraid, to go through all the nitty-gritty nuances of all the areas that you can fill out. I want to reassure you, photo, headline, summary, those are the crucial areas. Of course, current position and or past position are very crucial as well. You can simply cut and paste your resume into those current position, past position blocks. I think that that's fine, and that's the other thing of making sure that you keep all of that information very tidy so that people can skim through it. So for me, that's where I can get those bullet points, is from that great Word document linked or Word document resume that you've created, and then I can put that into the current position and past position block. But again, we're focusing on photo, headline, summary, current position, and so forth. After you've created, and this is going to take some time to create your profile, so don't worry about if it's not done in one day. I think the most important thing to focus on is to make sure that your English grammar is very well done. So have someone proofread your LinkedIn profile, your resume. Make sure that the English grammar is up to date and there are no typographical errors. Even as a writer, I have typographical errors sometimes. So have someone proofread your work. Make sure there's a lot of white space, make it easy for the reader, and again, just get on the same side of the table as the reader to see, does this matter to them? Why should they care? So after creating the strong first impression, you're going to want to make those connections like Craig mentioned. You want to continue to build your network over time. You want to connect with people that you already know and the people that you want to get to know. So this could be any current people, current clients, past colleagues and so forth, even your friends and family. Connect with anybody from the American Marketing Association. Join the groups. See if there's a way for you to engage in conversation. Volunteering is a great way, and I know that there's a few people here on the AMA team that have volunteered, and I'm sure you've built out your network as a result of volunteering as well. So building out your network is very crucial, but it has to be, in my opinion, focus on quality over quantity. Don't just randomly connect with everyone out there
Hey, do you want to maybe like take over?
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I was actually going to ask for you, Craig. So if I can get Craig back, because I think I'm hearing some background. Does anybody else hear that? So Craig, I think she was asking a question related to using LinkedIn with and the keywords, and she was saying how you had some really interesting insights on that. So do you want to expand a little bit on that? That would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So as far as the keywords, I mean, I always tell people to think like Google. Remember that recruiters that are using these systems to help us speed up our efficiency, make it easier to go through a lot of candidates, whether it's through our database, whether it's through the back end of LinkedIn. We're going to type in a bunch of keywords that have been basically come out of our conversations with our clients, basically saying, these are the top 3 or 4 things I want to see in a candidate. It allows us to shortlist those people that are most likely to fit that criteria. Again, I'm also only looking at people that are indicating that they're looking for work, and then I'm going to go through them. In some systems, like my system, for example, tells me a percentage, like it shows me like 95% of the words I'm looking for. Once we start to get to about 50%, I generally don't even look there. And I'll start to go through the candidates that I've thrown into my pile, or my pipeline. And that's where I'll start to go through and make sure that those people fit there. One of the things that Leslie also talked about was the profile, whether it's your profile on your resume or your profile on your LinkedIn. One of my hacks to save myself time is to go into people's LinkedIn, and I'll use that often as the opening or to coax the profile summary that I present to a client when I'm presenting a candidate, because a lot of times they can tell a better story than I can. And then I'll use that and build on it by adding in, like, you know, the critical software experience that they have, or the industry expertise that they have, the things that the client's looking for. So if you make my job easier by making a really great profile, some people just do bullets. Leslie will probably say this, it's a missed opportunity. You know, bullets are going to show you up on my page. But when I look at who you are and what you've done, when I look at that summary, after I've looked at the fact that you've got a lot of the matching criteria, I'm not going to get much detail out of there. I might still throw you into my pipeline to message you. I'll send out a blast to all those people in my pipeline to say, hey, can we talk? And then at that point, further qualify you to see if you're going to get a full interview.
Excellent, thanks. Well, I was going to ask Leslie this because it came up, the whole idea of, you know, everyone's encouraged to put content out there. And so obviously authoring content is important, and there's obviously curating other people's content. Is that something you ever look at in terms of evaluating somebody, in terms of what kind of message they're putting out there and that positioning of their own brand?
It's actually, it's not so much a fact that if they're putting out a lot of content, the social media platforms don't like people who aren't active, which means that if you post a little, you don't get loaded into the algorithm and thrown into your friends and connections faces. So if you are active on LinkedIn, you are regularly checking things and responding, the system will like you more. It'll put you in front of more people. And so that means that you could potentially get a share in front of somebody that might be a hiring manager. They're like, oh, this guy looks like somebody I might be looking to hire. And they might reach out to you directly. For the recruiters ourselves, we're going to be looking in the back end. LinkedIn is not going to penalize you from getting in front of us, because if we don't see placements because of people we're reaching out to, I'm not going to renew my contract with LinkedIn. So they're not going to penalize my ability to find you, but on the organic side, you're going to be penalized if you're not really leveraging LinkedIn. And Leslie will speak to this as well. So many people who are comfy and cozy in a job disengage from their network. They disengage from maintaining relationships. And in fact, they'll even disengage from the guy who got them a job, like myself, or I see Rick's on the phone. It's so awful to suddenly get a random call after you've reached out and you placed this person in a job 5 years ago, and they're like, hey, you haven't heard very much from me, but I'm back on the job search. And you're kind of like, oh, that's convenient. You know, it's not really great for relationship building. So something to talk about. Leslie, I think we should get you back on the line because we lost you.
Yeah.
I went out and bought a brand new router. Everything was going great, and I still lose connections. So I don't know. Technology. What can I tell you?
Welcome. Yeah, it's digital. So a couple. We were just obviously about to go to questions anyhow. So when you're sharing content, you talk a lot about LinkedIn and sharing content on there. Do you sit with, I guess, the different social media platforms? Do you share the same content on each platform, or do you customize it to each one?
For me, it's customizing to each one for sure, because you have to put the right content in the right context. And so on LinkedIn, of course, this is a professional network. It's quite different than any other network out there. I don't like to see too much. I mean, there's some people that say, well, this is your personal brand, so share what's going on in your life. I kind of don't really want to see what you had for breakfast, or that you took your kids to the park on LinkedIn. That doesn't work for me. But some people are like, no, I think you should be. I don't know. I think we're sharing, in some ways, I think we're sharing a little too much personal information on the professional network. Myself, I keep it professional myself.
Excellent. So obviously storytelling is a big part of a personal brand, but what if you're not a natural storyteller? What are there templates or are there advice you can give to help someone who just isn't comfortable with the way to tell the story? And you talked a little bit about that boastful versus, trying to be professional about things. And so do you have any advice for people who are not natural storytellers?
Well, it's working. Obviously, I mean, sometimes you can work with someone who is a storyteller, who does craft stories. I've provided some takeaway tips, which hopefully will be helpful. If anybody wants to reach out to me, if they haven't, if it's not included in that document, because off the top of my head, I can't recall if I included it. Actually, in the book that I wrote, and hopefully I have included for you guys, I'm happy to do so for free. I have like a little bit of a plug and play sort of worksheet in my book, and can send along the worksheet as well. And it really just boils down to telling the story. Of course, I can't find the page. It boils down to telling. It's like a fill in the blank worksheet that really sort of identifies who you are, what do you do, how do you help. Hopefully I can show it here. And it just basically is kind of like a Mad Libs version of getting inspired to tell this story anyway. But again, I think if you start to think of your why, I've watched the Simon Sinek Start With Why easily 25 times. And every time I watch it, I'm like inspired a little bit more to reverse engineer the story. I think why gets into the emotions of like what makes you really passionate and driven about what you do. And I think that helps to reframe those brags too. Because if you're passionate and driven to do what you do, then it doesn't sound like, oh yeah, I'm so amazing, check me out. It's like, I'm doing this to be of service to my network, to be of service to my employer. I think that's easier to say, so if you're, I'm driven to solve problems. I love analytics, or I love to combine my creativity with my analytical blah, 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 like whatever it is. And then Craig will attest to this too, is I think the tough part as marketers, we're kind of a dime a dozen, like it's, I don't mean to, but in some ways you have to differentiate yourself, right? As marketers, like the same principles apply. Marketing is marketing, sales is sales. How are you different? And so the storytelling is a big part of that. And I think, it's working either with somebody who can be objective to tell that story. Sometimes that's why I do what I do, is to mirror back to people. So what you're telling me is that you love to do this, and just getting out of your own way is really the biggest hurdle, is to get out of your own way.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that, because it's very hard to be objective about yourself. So this is the final question.
I say all the time. Yeah, one of the things I say all the time is when you're inside the jar, you can't see the label. Right?
That's awesome. I'm going to use that and the Blaise Pascal quote. Those are awesome. Yeah. So last question is, so obviously with brand and brand strategy, you're measuring the brand and how effective it is. Now, is there anything that you can do to, like when you are putting out content or curating content, or just, how you manage your LinkedIn, is there anything that you can use to start to evaluate the effectiveness of the brand that you're building about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn LinkedIn isn't great with their metrics and analytics, quite frankly. I don't think from my perspective you can see a lot, but I think engagement is key, right? We're human beings dealing with other human beings on the other side of the computer. So you can't, what I recommend is try to post maybe once a week if you could. That's a good week, you know, and if you're a heavier user, then post more often than that. But be of service, be of value to your network, whether you think you found a post that you found to be really interesting, or maybe you've had an accomplishment and you want to like, woo, woo, you want to toot that horn to say, I've got this certification, or I've just been promoted, or, you know, we have to, no one's going to market us better than we market ourselves. It's not easy, but this is 2021. So we got to get out of our own way. It's not, listen, I struggle with it all the time too. I think as Canadians too, we're all like, oh, shucks, so bashful, like, oh, I don't want to say these things. We've been told to, like, you know, don't stand out. But, you know, it's not easy, but it's easier for us to sell another brand than it is to sell our own, for sure. But the one thing that I will say before I stop talking, because I can go, is this idea of wabi-sabi. And I love to usually finish off the presentations I do with this concept of like a wabi-sabi is, from what I understand, a Japanese art form that is finding the beauty in imperfection. So if a bowl or a cup is broken, it's glued back together with gold. Some people have heard this. And so most of us beat ourselves up for our imperfections. Mine is talking too much. And so most of us beat ourselves up for those imperfections, but really it's finding the gold in these imperfections. That's what makes us beautiful. That's what makes us stand out. And we have to find and embrace our uniqueness. And I think that's hopefully that'll get people out of their own way, because that's the biggest struggle for everybody, from chief cook to bottle washer.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thought too. I like that, because it's difficult for everyone to try and get out of their way. And you know, look, I love the way that you talk about, you know, breaking out and like away from the noise and trying to differentiate yourself and be authentic. So I think, you know, those are great messages. And you know, also the photo, because my favorite photo on LinkedIn are the people who, I saw one person in a bikini, and and the people who are taking photos of themselves while they're driving. Those are I'm a dangerous person, I guess, is what they're trying to say. Exactly. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Leslie. It's been amazing. I understand, you know, a lot of energy that you bring, and so I understand all the fanfare about the brand stuff and the personal brand that you bring. So that's incredible. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, so that was it for everyone. I think that that's essentially the end of our session, but I just want everybody to know there's going to be an email that's going out right after this that is going to ask you for a survey, as well as we're interested in, you know, or we're going to let you know who won the 3 months of career coaching. And I want to thank Tina Portillo for making this possible. Obviously, Craig Lund and Leslie Hughes for being great speakers and being so generous with their time and wisdom. You know, people really certainly value that, and it's beneficial to all of us. I've learned a lot tonight. Just want a final word from myself. I guess it's hard getting a job. It's, you know, the hardest job you're going to have. And I just want to compliment everybody who showed up tonight, because it's a warm August night. And it's, you know, it's easy to be outside, but you're the kind of person who stepped up and is here, I guess, improving upon themselves and making sure that you do have that opportunity and are prepared for that next job. So I just want to say compliments to you. Just want to say on behalf of Pratik, Kazi, Sayuri, and myself, thank you everyone for participating tonight, and have a fantastic evening.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.